Chosen one, stop what you're doing. I need you to take a deep breath, close your eyes, and truly hear this. What you're about to hear isn't just advice. This is a direct command from the throne room of heaven, and it's meant for you. Right now, God is speaking over your life. You may be facing challenges, whether it's misunderstandings, accusations, or being pushed to your limit. The world around you is full of noise, but in this moment, God is saying one powerful word to you: silence. I know what you're thinking. Silence. In a world that demands explanations, in a world that challenges your every move, silence can feel like weakness. But I'm here to tell you that silence, when commanded by God, is not a sign of weakness. It is your greatest strength. It is the shield He has placed in your hands. Your silence is not empty. It is filled with divine power, protection, and strategy. It is in this sacred silence that God will move for you in ways that no words ever could. Trust in this divine instruction. Stay silent. Let God speak for you. God's command for silence is not just some arbitrary request or a passive suggestion. It is a divine instruction from the throne room of heaven, meant to protect and position you for a victory that only He can deliver. You've been placed in this moment, this very circumstance, not by accident, but by divine design. As much as you may feel like defending yourself, explaining your choices, or justifying your actions, the call for silence is part of God's greater plan for you, a plan that only He can fully comprehend, but one that you must trust with all your heart. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at the vast unknown below, yet knowing that the path forward lies in silence, in stillness, and in trust. It's unsettling, isn't it? The urge to speak, to explain yourself, to show the world that you are right and they are wrong. It pulls at you like a force of nature. But here's the thing. When God asks you to remain silent, He's not silencing your voice for His own pleasure. He is silencing you because He is working in ways that words cannot explain. Think about the times in your life when you felt misunderstood, when people around you twisted your words or questioned your motives. It's painful, isn't it? You've been through situations where every fiber of your being screamed to rise up and defend yourself, to set the record straight, to show the world your truth. But that's the world's way: reacting, responding, defending. God's way, however, requires something different. His way requires you to step into the quiet and allow His voice to rise up in your place. Your silence is not a sign of defeat. It's your shield of protection. It is in these moments of quiet that God fights your battles, and when He speaks, His words carry the weight and authority of heaven. You may feel a deep frustration when you're being wrongly accused or misunderstood. Perhaps there have been moments when you wanted to scream, "But I didn't do that," or "That's not who I am." The world is loud, filled with distractions, demands, and provocations. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has a comment. And every accusation feels like it's cutting deeper than the last. But listen to this. There is immense power in silence, especially when it is commanded by God. The silence God is asking you to maintain is a spiritual weapon that creates space for divine protection to manifest. It is a deliberate act of trust, a trust that God's timing is perfect and that His plan will unfold not because of your words, but because of your obedience. In the book of Exodus, when the Israelites found themselves trapped between Pharaoh's advancing army and the Red Sea, Moses didn't urge them to prepare for battle. Instead, he commanded them to stand still and witness the salvation of the Lord. In their silence, in their stillness, heaven moved. Miracles unfolded and the sea parted. There was no battle cry, no act of retaliation, no defense. They were simply silent and God worked. This same divine principle applies to you now. Your silence is not a void. It's a space where God moves in ways you cannot yet understand. It's a sacred moment where divine protection surrounds you, where the atmosphere is being prepared for your breakthrough. And as you stand in the silence, trust that God's timing is at work. The silence you're experiencing isn't the end. It's the beginning of something profound, something life-changing. The enemy would love for you to speak out of anger, frustration, or fear. But remember this, when you open your mouth at the wrong time, you invite unnecessary delays. Proverbs 18:21 reminds us that the power of life and death is in the tongue. A single word spoken out of turn can change the course of your future. It's in these moments when you feel the pressure to speak that God is testing your faith, your ability to trust that His plan is unfolding without you needing to defend yourself. Think about Joseph in the Bible. He was chosen by God, gifted with dreams of greatness, but he shared those dreams too soon before his heart and his understanding were ready for what God was about to do. As a result, his words became a target, and he faced years of suffering because he spoke prematurely. God allowed Joseph to be silent in prison, in the pit, and even before Pharaoh. And it was in that silence, in that waiting period, that God's purpose was fulfilled. Joseph didn't defend himself. He didn't explain the dreams he had to anyone. He trusted God's timing. And in that quiet trust, God moved him from a prisoner to the ruler of Egypt. His silence became his protection, his shield, and his ultimate victory. In this moment, God is asking you to trust in the same process. The silence you're walking in right now is not punishment, it's preparation. It's in these quiet moments, these sacred pauses, that God is shaping your character, preparing your heart, and positioning you for a breakthrough that will be so undeniable that even your enemies will be left speechless. When you can trust God's voice more than your own, when you can stay quiet while He works, you'll begin to see just how powerful His plans are. He is protecting you, refining you, and waiting for the perfect moment to reveal His victory on your behalf. So as you navigate through this season, hold on to the truth that God's instruction to stay silent is not a burden, it's a blessing. It's a divine protection that shields you from unnecessary battles, from speaking too soon, from reacting out of emotion. It's an invitation to allow God to fight for you, to defend you, and to prepare the way for your victory. Your silence today is the key to your victory tomorrow. Trust in His plan, rest in His protection, and know that His timing will never fail. Silence is often misunderstood. In a world that celebrates constant noise action and the need for validation, it's easy to see silence as weakness. It feels counterintuitive to our human instincts. When we are under attack, when we are accused, when the world seems to misunderstand us, the last thing we want to do is remain silent. We want to explain, to defend, to clarify. But here's the divine secret. Silence is not weakness. It is a spiritual weapon, a shield that guards you while God fights on your behalf. In moments when the world expects you to react, when emotions threaten to spill out, silence can be the very thing that invites divine intervention. In the book of Exodus, Moses gave one of the most profound commands to the Israelites: stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Exodus 14:13. The Israelites were facing an impossible situation. Pharaoh's army was closing in on them, and the Red Sea lay before them. Every instinct would have told them to fight, to run, or to defend themselves in some way. But God's command was clear: stand still. Moses didn't tell them to rally their forces or to figure out how they could win. He told them to stand still and wait for God to deliver them. In that moment of stillness, God moved. The Red Sea parted, and the Israelites walked through on dry land, escaping certain death. It was not their strength or their words that delivered them. It was their obedience to remain silent and trust that God would do the impossible. This principle is further illustrated in the story of Jericho. The Israelites were commanded to march around the city in silence for 6 days. On the 7th day, after the Israelites had walked in complete silence, they were told to shout, and the walls of Jericho would fall. Silence in this case was not passivity. It was a deliberate act of faith, a trust that God was orchestrating the victory behind the scenes. It was in the silence that the Israelites were preparing themselves for divine action. The shout didn't bring down the walls, God did. Silence invited his power to manifest in a way that no human effort ever could. Silence is a tool that invites divine intervention. When we are tempted to speak out of turn, to react out of emotion, or to defend ourselves prematurely, we risk stepping into the realm of the natural. But silence is the doorway to the supernatural. It's a spiritual weapon that allows God to fight battles on your behalf, battles that you cannot win in your own strength. The silence is not an absence, it is the presence of trust. Trust that God is working behind the scenes, repositioning people and orchestrating events for your good. While you remain silent, he is moving mountains. While you resist the urge to speak, he is working in ways that you can't yet see. When you choose silence, you allow God the space to move on your behalf. It's an act of faith, a declaration that you trust his timing more than your own need for control. This is why silence is so powerful. It is the ultimate demonstration of trust in God. It's a shield that protects your heart from the wounds that words can inflict, and it positions you to receive the breakthrough that only God can provide. Just as Moses and the Israelites experienced God's miraculous deliverance in their silence, so too will you witness his power when you choose to remain quiet and trust his plan. The silence that God calls you to is not just a passive waiting period. It is a profound act of spiritual strategy that leads to divine vindication. Vindication is the restoration of your honor, the justification of your actions, and the demonstration to the world that God is with you. In the silence, God is working behind the scenes to set the record straight, to expose the truth, and to show the world that his favor rests upon you. Your silence is not a sign of defeat. It is the precursor to the most powerful vindication the world will ever witness. Think about the story of Joseph. He was a young man, chosen by God, gifted with dreams of greatness, but his brothers, consumed with jealousy, sold him into slavery. For years, Joseph endured suffering, misunderstanding, and false accusations. When his brothers had the opportunity to apologize, Joseph chose silence over bitterness. He didn't seek revenge, and he didn't try to defend himself. Instead, he waited in silence for God's timing, trusting that the Lord was working on his behalf. Joseph's silence during those years was not an admission of guilt or weakness. It was the divine preparation that led to his eventual promotion in Egypt. Joseph's vindication didn't come through his words. It came through God's timing. When Joseph was elevated to a position of power in Egypt, he had the chance to confront his brothers. But instead of using his newfound position to punish them, he forgave them. In that moment, God vindicated Joseph, not only restoring him to his rightful place, but also showing his brothers and everyone around him that God had been with him all along. Joseph's silence was the precursor to his victory, his vindication, and his ultimate restoration. God used Joseph's willingness to remain silent to bring about a redemption story that would change the course of history. Joseph's story is not just about his personal journey. It's about how silence opens the door for divine vindication. When you choose silence in the face of injustice, when you trust God's timing instead of rushing to defend yourself, you are setting the stage for your own vindication. This is a truth that cannot be ignored. God will vindicate you in ways that leave your enemies speechless. The very people who have misunderstood you, criticized you, or tried to tear you down will one day witness God's justice on your behalf. But that vindication requires you to remain silent, to trust God's plan, and to believe that He is working on your behalf, even when it feels like nothing is happening. Silence does not mean that God is absent. It means He is working in ways that are unseen. He is positioning you for a breakthrough that will make your enemies tremble. They may mock you now, they may question your actions, and they may try to discredit you. But when God moves on your behalf, there is no question of who is in control. Your silence becomes the foundation for his vindication, and his victory is the proof of his divine favor over your life. Look at the life of David. He was anointed as king while he was still a young shepherd. Yet he spent years running from King Saul, who sought to kill him. David had every reason to defend himself, to speak out against Saul, or to gather an army to fight back. But David chose silence. When Saul was vulnerable in the cave, David's men urged him to strike, to take advantage of the moment and kill Saul. But David resisted. He chose silence, knowing that his vindication would come through God's timing, not through his own actions. David trusted that God would make a way for him, and he didn't need to speak to justify his calling. In the end, David's silence led to Saul's downfall and David's ascension to the throne. His vindication came not through his words, but through his patience, his trust in God's plan, and his refusal to react to Saul's attacks. The Bible is filled with examples of how silence leads to divine vindication. Jesus, when he was questioned by Pilate, remained silent. He didn't try to defend himself even when false accusations were made against him. Jesus knew that his silence was a strategy, a way for God to reveal his plan of salvation for the world. His silence didn't mean he was defeated. It meant that God was about to do something that would change the world forever. When you are in a season of silence, remember that your vindication is coming. Your silence is not in vain. It is the foundation for a divine breakthrough that will leave your enemies speechless. God's vindication often comes in ways we don't expect. It doesn't always look like we think it should, but it is always perfect. When we remain silent, when we refuse to react in the natural, we open the door for God to step in and show us his power. Vindication is not about proving your worth to others. It is about allowing God to demonstrate your worth to the world. It's about trusting that he will restore your honor, elevate your status, and bring justice in a way that leaves no room for doubt that he is the one who fought on your behalf. Your silence today is preparing the ground for your victory tomorrow. As you remain quiet, trust that God is orchestrating everything behind the scenes. He is positioning you for the breakthrough you've been waiting for. And when the time is right, he will reveal his vindication in a way that will leave everyone in awe. Just as Joseph's silence led to his elevation, just as David's silence led to his throne, your silence is preparing you for the victory that is already on its way. Trust in God's timing, trust in his process, and know that your vindication is assured. The enemy knows your weaknesses, the areas where you are most vulnerable. He understands your emotional triggers, the moments when you feel most provoked, misunderstood, or disrespected. And here's the strategy he often uses to get you off track. He will provoke you into speaking at the wrong time. He will send people into your life who will push your buttons, press on old wounds, and twist your words. The goal: to get you to react emotionally, to defend yourself, to speak in anger, and ultimately to derail the divine plan God is working in your life. You've experienced this before, haven't you? That family member who always knows how to bring up your past, that coworker who keeps questioning your decisions, that neighbor who spreads lies about you. The enemy doesn't need to destroy you with a major attack. He doesn't need to make your life fall apart all at once. He just needs to get you to react with words. That's where the power of restraint and silence becomes so important. When the enemy can get you to open your mouth and defend yourself, you give him access to your emotions. You allow him to manipulate the situation to take you out of alignment with God's will for your life. Every time you speak from a place of frustration, anger, or pain, you risk missing out on the divine breakthrough that God is preparing for you. When you react emotionally, you operate from the natural, not the spiritual. Your words become a tool in the enemy's hands, and the situation escalates. Instead of being a testimony of God's grace, your response becomes just another argument, just another round in the battle the enemy wants you to fight. But here's the truth. God didn't call you to fight in your own strength. He called you to remain silent and let Him fight for you. Silence in the face of provocation isn't weakness. It is the exercise of spiritual power. It's understanding that there is a greater force at work behind the scenes, and you don't need to defend yourself when God is already on your side. The enemy knows that once you speak out of frustration, once you react prematurely, you put yourself in a position where your breakthrough is delayed. He understands that your words, when spoken out of turn, can have the power to block the very blessings God is trying to bring into your life. Remember, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Proverbs 18:21. One word spoken out of emotion can set back your breakthrough for months. But silence is a powerful spiritual weapon that holds back the enemy's advances and positions you for the victory God has already promised. When you choose silence, you create a space for God to act. Your words are not just a reflection of your feelings. They are spiritual forces that can either align with God's will or derail it. When you are tempted to speak out of hurt or frustration, remember that silence gives God the room He needs to move in your life. By staying quiet, you are not surrendering to the enemy. You are allowing God to fight your battles. And when God fights for you, no weapon formed against you can prosper. So the next time the enemy tries to provoke you into reacting, take a deep breath. Hold your peace. Trust that your silence will speak louder than any word ever could. When you withhold your words, you allow God to move in ways you cannot even comprehend. This is the power of restraint. This is the strength of silence. Throughout the Bible, we see powerful examples of men and women who understood the divine power of silence. Their stories are not just historical accounts, they are blueprints for how we too can walk in divine wisdom and strength. One of the most striking examples of silence leading to spiritual growth and divine protection comes from David. As a young man, David was anointed to be king over Israel. However, his path to the throne was not straightforward. For years, David lived in the wilderness, hiding from King Saul, who sought to kill him out of jealousy. David had every reason to react to defend himself, to gather an army and take his throne by force. But David understood something that many of us often forget. His vindication would not come through his own efforts, but through God's timing. There were multiple occasions when David could have taken matters into his own hands. In 1 Samuel 24, David and his men found Saul in a vulnerable position, asleep in a cave. His men urged David to take the opportunity to kill Saul, but David chose silence instead. He quietly cut off a piece of Saul's robe and then later showed it to Saul as proof that he had spared his life. David's silence in that moment wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of trust in God's plan. David knew that if he acted in anger or frustration, he would not be operating in God's timing. Instead, he waited for God's perfect moment. His restraint became a testimony of God's power. By staying silent, David positioned himself to receive the throne God had promised him. And when the time came, his vindication was undeniable. His silence was not a passive surrender, but a bold declaration of faith in God's ability to act on his behalf. Another powerful example of silence leading to divine vindication comes from the life of Job. Job is often cited as a model of patience and endurance, but his story is also a profound lesson in the power of silence in the face of suffering. Job endured incredible loss. His health, his wealth, and his family were all taken from him in a matter of days. His friends, instead of offering comfort, accused him of hidden sin, questioning his integrity and his faithfulness. Job could have defended himself. He could have pleaded his case, but instead he chose silence. For 37 chapters, Job wrestled with the pain of his suffering in silence. He did not curse God or question his sovereignty. He waited, trusting that God would reveal the truth in his timing. Job's silence was not weakness. It was trust. It was trust in God's ability to act even when the world around him was falling apart. And in the end, God vindicated Job. Not only was his health restored, but God also doubled his possessions, and his family was restored to him. Job's silence allowed God to work on his behalf. If Job had spoken out in frustration, if he had tried to defend his integrity, he would have missed out on the divine vindication that came through God's perfect timing. Both David and Job understood the divine nature of silence. It was not a passive acceptance of their circumstances, but a deliberate act of trust in God's ability to act on their behalf. Silence in their cases was not defeat, it was spiritual strength. They recognized that there are times when words are not necessary. There are moments when God's voice is the only one that needs to be heard. By choosing silence, they gave God the space to move, to act, and to deliver them in ways that no human effort ever could. Silence connects us to deep spiritual growth. It teaches us patience, humility, and trust. It is in the moments when we choose silence over reaction that we grow closest to God. Silence allows us to surrender our desires for immediate answers, immediate vindication, and immediate justice. It teaches us that God's timing is always perfect and that His ways are higher than ours. By remaining silent, we allow God to work in ways that transcend our understanding, bringing us to a place of victory that we could never achieve on our own. Just as David and Job learned that silence is not defeat, we must learn to embrace silence as a spiritual discipline. It's not about being passive or avoiding conflict. It's about trusting that God is working in the unseen, orchestrating events in our favor. Silence gives us the power to step out of the natural and into the supernatural, where God's plan unfolds in ways that leave the world in awe. In conclusion, silence is a powerful tool for spiritual growth and divine protection. When we choose silence, we invite God's intervention. Just as David's silence led to his rise to the throne, and Job's silence led to his restoration, so too will our silence bring us to the place God has prepared for us. Silence is not a sign of defeat. It is a sign of trust in God's ability to act. So chosen, in one, embrace the power of silence. Trust that in your quiet moments, God is working on your behalf. Just as He was with David, just as He was with Job, so too is He with you. Your silence today is preparing the way for your victory tomorrow. Chosen one, as we come to the end of this sacred moment, I want to reaffirm the core message that has been shared with you. Silence is not a weakness, but a divine strategy that protects, prepares, and positions you for greater victory. In a world that constantly urges you to speak to defend yourself and to justify your actions, God is calling you to a higher place of trust, where silence becomes the most powerful weapon in your spiritual arsenal. It is in this silence that you allow God to do what only He can do. Work behind the scenes, orchestrating your victory, defending your name, and positioning you for the breakthrough you've been praying for. In the face of provocation, misunderstanding, or attack, remember that God's plan for you is far greater than anything you could achieve on your own through words or defense. Resist the temptation to speak out of frustration, anger, or hurt. Trust that God's timing is perfect and that He will reveal your victory when the moment is right. Your silence today is not in vain. It is preparing you for the victory God is about to bring into your life. It is in the quiet moments that God is positioning you for something far greater than you could ever imagine. So I encourage you, chosen one, to hold fast to this divine strategy. Trust that God is working on your behalf in this sacred moment. Trust that He is protecting you, preparing you, and positioning you for something far beyond what you can see with your natural eyes. Your silence is not a sign of defeat. It is a declaration of trust in God's perfect timing and His ability to act on your behalf. Now, let us close in prayer, affirming the power of silence in our lives. Father, I come before you today with a heart full of trust and gratitude. I embrace the power of silence, knowing that it is a divine strategy you have given me to protect, Prepare and position me for the victory you have planned. I resist the urge to defend myself and trust in your perfect timing to reveal my breakthrough. I ask for the strength to remain silent when the world tries to provoke me, and the courage to stand still and see your salvation. May your peace fill my heart. And may I always remember that when I am silent, you are working on my behalf. I trust in your plan, and I trust in your timing. In Jesus' name, amen. May you embrace the power of silence, knowing that God is working on your behalf in this sacred moment. Trust His timing and trust that victory is on the way.